Okay, here's our next victim. I shouldn't say victim, it's already been a victim. It's been a victim of time and neglect. I gotta clean this one back up too. I'll give you a little sweeping overview of this thing. I guess I will just start on the top. I will disassemble the parts that will come off. I don't think I'm going to get so far as to, take all the guts off and take all the tables off. I will see when I get that far if it really starts to get sticky. I'm just going to try to lubricate everything and make sure it all comes back to working. I think the cast iron top is the worst of it. This doesn't look good. I'll polish this down. I'll make sure everything works and turns and spins. The motor itself spins okay, and the bearings sound all right. I will need to get new blades, which are not super available, but take a look at this. The belt still says Craftsman on it, so this is probably the original belt. And still in pretty good shape. I could run that thing, and probably will. You can see where the fence was sitting. Cast iron didn't get quite as rusty. Oddly, where the blade guard was sitting, it still did, so who knows. So I want the rest of this to come up at least as good as this, and then I'll polish that up as well. Let's get to it. This is 120 grit. On the other one I used my sander. My sander made a big mess. It just splashed oil everywhere. I'd rather not wear it today. So I'm just going to sand it by hand. And I think I was actually getting a better result by hand anyway. So. In case you didn't notice, I got the big bottle of WD-40, not the little one, the big one. Comment down below if you know what song that's from. There you go. All right, come on. I know, you're ready. All right, this is looking pretty good. This has only been, about 5 minutes worth of sanding, and it's looking better. I think you're probably seeing a lot of reflection from the window. You might not be seeing just how rough it still is. Let's bring you over here. Yeah, ignore the cat. He just wants attention. So you can see, I was looking at what I thought were scratches from sanding, but it's not. That's still the milling marks from when the thing was made. So it's not that bad. It doesn't have nearly the pits in it that the table saw had. So I'm going to go to I think I'm already going to go to a finer sandpaper and see if I can just kind of get some kind of a finish on this thing. Yeah. So this is 320. This is what I had. So I went from 120 to 320. Not sure if the light's going to keep you from seeing this. It still has tiny pits in the finish. But all in all, you know, compared to the other side that I haven't done with fine yet, it looks better. Does it look better than it did? Barn cat thinks so. That came up a lot faster than I thought it would. I'm not that concerned about small pits and staining. Can't really feel it. It's smooth, it's going to be smooth to the wood going over top of it, so I'm happy with that. Well, that didn't take nearly as long as I assumed it would. Now this looks kind of rusty and crusty, but it really isn't. It's dirty, for certain. And it still has its coat of gold. Is that gold? Whatever paint is on it is still there. I could probably put some solvent on there and make it look better. Not really that critical to me that it's pretty. I want it to be functional. So that said, let's get this knob off here. Mud daubers, of course. I was watching a guy on YouTube, one of the car shows that I watch, and he was asking what mud daubers were. Is it true that not everybody has mud daubers? Dirt daubers, as some people call them. Are there people who don't know what they are? I envy you. Now, dirt daubers aren't too bad. They aren't as bad as wasps and hornets and stuff. They don't really sting. They're not really that aggressive. But boy, they build their little mud huts everywhere. It is shocking the tiny places that they'll go into to build their little homes. And this is something else. I think it's aluminum, is it? Zinc? What is this made out of? If anybody knows, let me know. Because it's not rusting. Looks like it's cast. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's aluminum. All right, let's get this back together. And that goes on here. So I'll need to clean up that bar. Well, again, smooth if not pretty. Yeah. That clamps on there. It does have a lot of wiggle. Aha. You saw me wiggle and waggle that, and it did seem like it was a little too loosey-goosey. And there's a reason for that. This does have a place for a screw to go in here, and I assume once you lock it in place, you tighten this screw down on the bar. That keeps this end from moving, and then this plate screwing it down here keeps the center from moving. That way it's locked on both sides. Without that screw, and I'll have to look up in the manual what that screw is supposed to be, a thumb screw or something. And yes, I did find a manual for this. It is from the 1960s, late 50s. It's kind of hard to tell from the manufacturer plate on here. The model number on here is a 103.21820. And on all of the old Craftsman tools, the first 3 digits tell what manufacturer made this for Sears. And 103, I don't know, I believe it was Emerson Tool Company. The one before this, I think, made in the 50s, was made by a company called King Seeley. And I don't think this is one of those. Ouch, cat. Yeah, you're stuck to me. Get your claw out of there. Get it out. There you go. You're a good cat, but you're pesky. Alright. I'll have to continue that topic later when the cat stops. Now you can see I've already gotten a couple of these blades out of here, and the way they work, got these 3 Allen head screws. You loosen those up and it comes out with the blade and a wedge. There's a wedge that goes in there that actually takes the pressure of the screws and holds it against that blade. And they even still have the number on them. If you can see that, this is 18127. So if I need to order them, there's the number. Now they've got some schmutz on them, so I'll need to clean the schmutz off before I put these wedges back in. Now these blades are super thick. They got a lot of meat to them. I don't know, I might be able to sharpen those up if I could find a way to hold on to them, or I could replace them. Roll it over, loosen it, and then do the same for the other 2. You see, you just take out the blade and the wedge, and now I can clean up the cutter head without getting hurt, and clean up the blades, clean up the wedges, and decide about the blades. Because the camera battery very rudely died, I'll talk to this camera. I think I may have mentioned about these blades. I went ahead and polished up these blades with some of this 320 grit paper. That's a little coarse for a proper sharp edge if you talk to anybody. So I will probably pull out some higher grit paper, 800, or maybe even get my stones and just try to put a little polish on these. But they came up very nicely. They had no nicks in them at all. So I thought, hey, I'll just sharpen these up and save my money for wood. So, I mean, they're not gonna take any hair off my arm the way they are. Isn't that the litmus test for a sharp blade? But I will polish them up with a little finer grit and see if I can make them worthy to put back on this planer jointer. Not yet, but it's very, I'm going to call that good. I hit these other ones. All right, I don't know how sharp they are when you pull them out of the package, but that's, I'm going to call that good. A little more cleanup and lubrication. I want to make sure these tables adjust properly. And then I can reassemble it and see if I can get it set up. I took out all the set screws. Tried to clean up the cutter head somewhat. Cleaned out the valleys there so that there wouldn't be anything getting in the way of the wedges and blades sitting in there properly. I'm going to reassemble it, but I'm going to have to read up on setting the blades. I may have to also go back and look at my footage to see how this came out. How quickly we forget. I can tell which way these go because they have marks from the set screws. So I had that initially wrong. And these, which way do they cut? Maybe they cut this way. Yeah, that looks right. Okay, I'm not going to tighten those down because they're going to need to be set. It's not a, drop to the bottom of the slot and that's the setting. You have to adjust those to the outfeed table, which I'm not quite ready to do yet. Let's just put the rest of them in. They look shiny. I like it. All right. Well, my back's tired. I think I'm going to call that enough for today, and I will read up on this thing. I'll try to get the manual out and read up on setting it up. And I will set the blades, and I will set the tables, and I'll go through whatever machinations that requires. I'll try to find a screw for that fence, and we'll put it back together and fire it up. It's a new day. I'm back at it with the jointer here. I was able to clean it up a little bit. It improved marginally. The top still looks good. I think I came in today and I think it looked better than it did yesterday. So I had a gander at the manual I was able to download, and I took a look at the instructions for leveling the table. We can't set the blade height to the table until we get the tables matched to each other. Now they both have adjustments. One is just basically set up to the other, so I'm not going to touch the outfeed table. We're just going to call this good. And I'm going to match the other one to it. Is that wise? Yeah, that's fine. I guess if you wanted to get real precise about it, you could match the edge of the outfeed table to the cutter head, because that is mounted rigid in the frame, and that way you would get an even reveal on the blades to the edge of the outfeed table. But because they are not locked in place, they're not rigid, and they get set on both sides anyway, it's a little more arbitrary. So I'm just going to leave this alone and make my job a little bit easier. And I'm just going to match the infeed table to the outfeed table. Now the way you do that, you've got 3 adjustment points underneath of here. And so you can set the height of the rear, and you can set the left and right height, which will then just pivot on this back point. So it becomes a little tricky. So I've got my straight edge here. I'm going to set this up so that this table is even to that table, and then we set the blade height to be equal to that line drawn between those 2 faces. Let's try it. All right, got my straight edge, and we're going to call this back outfeed table flat. And I come over here and I see that I'm off, and this one hits. So I know that the back is tilted down too far, and if I were to go over here farther, I see I've got a big gap here. So I know the back is up too high, this side is too low, and the front is too high. So we got a ways to go here. Now, it wasn't like that to begin with. I did mess with it this morning just to see how everything worked. I wanted to be able to at least speak about it intelligently. So I screwed everything up. So now we get to start from scratch. Yay. So first I want to see what I can do about getting the back down. Well, that's just laying there, isn't it? That's not quite size. Let's take this front down. My glasses down. I was able to adjust those underneath, and I got it to where that is right to the edge. I go to the back of the table, and it's hitting back there. There's no gap here, which is what I want. On the front, it's a little different. It's perfect on the edge. Then when it goes to the back, well, no, that feels good too. All right, we're going to be fine with that, at least for our purposes, for testing purposes. And I want to show you, and I was able to find a thumb screw to go into the back to lock the fence onto that adjustment bar there. Now, I may have to tweak it a little bit. It sticks out that far, which doesn't seem bad, but once it gets down here, if you try to adjust the fence over, like about that far, then that thumb screw starts to hit this thumb wheel here. So I might have to fix that if I end up using it that far over. Generally, you wouldn't move the fence over that far unless you're trying to do some kind of a rabbiting operation over here, which I've never done on a jointer, and probably in the last 20 years, few people have. Now I could be leaning over this thing for a while, so I'll get my stool here. The next trick is to adjust these blades. Now that we have in-feed and out-feed tables that match, what we need to do is turn the blade, and right where the blade hits its highest point in its rotation, it should just snag this ruler on both front and back. So right now, no contact on either side of the blade. So we need to loosen the blade, bring it up a bit, leave it a little bit high, and just barely snug it down so that we can just tap it down until it's even with both in-feed and out-feed tables. Okay. See there, it's snagging the ruler. All right, we're getting super close here. All right, number 2. I won't bore you with the rest of this, but I will bore you with this story. I looked up some history on this. If you go to Vintage Machinery, I think it's called Vintage Machinery something, they've got, you know, stories and history on some of these old things. And I was looking at this model number, and I guessed the other day that it might be Emerson. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case. This is 103.21820. So the 103 denotes King Sealy. King Sealy bought Central Specialty, I think, back in the way back. And I think Central Specialty made the woodworking tools for King Sealy. Now back in the 50s, up until mid-50s, I think they said, this plate would say King Sealy on it, but they said like the mid-50s, they changed it to say whatever it says now. Guaranteed highest quality. So this has to be, you know, after mid-50s. But they also said that in 1963, 64, something like that, Emerson bought out King Sealy. So all the tooling and all the machinery went to Emerson, but the Emerson prefix on the model numbers is 113. So because this is still a 103, it has to be like after 1954, 55, but not any later than probably 63, 64. So that gives you a little bit of a time range of this. Well, that took far longer than I hoped it would. Let's get this thing back together, plug it in, see if the motor actually works, get this belt on it, not in that order. This thing, which something I'm going to have to do, this does not have an actual on-off switch. You plug it in and it's running, so that's not the safest thing. So I need to get a switch. I had bought one. I think I bought this at the last woodworking show I was at. Basically, you just you plug this in, you plug the tool into it, and then you just hit this foot switch, and it will turn the motor on, which I thought was a good idea at the time. Now, it's been sitting for 10 years, so the switch is frozen up. And I think I would prefer an actual switch, like a modern switch with an off paddle. I can foresee issues with having a switch on the floor. If you're just, walking past and you step on it and the thing comes on, bad things could happen. So maybe I'll look out for an actual modern on-off switch. But until then, you plug it in and it's running. Fence and guard. Okay, I've got a 90 degrees here. It's actually locked front and back. We're just gonna call this good. Let me get this guard on here. Gotta be safe. Now, let's get the belt on it. Well, that's pretty loose. How do we tighten that up? I guess you just move the motor. The stand, which according to the manuals I was looking at, does appear to be period correct. So this is probably the stand that came with this jointer. Minus this piece. I think this looks more homemade, probably just to keep sawdust and wood chips out of the motor windings, which is not a bad plan. These rails basically just adjust back and forth for whatever you're using the stand for. So I think if I move these rails over farther, that will put a little more tension on this belt. So let's try to get that done. Like they have not moved in forever. Move or snap? What are they going to do? Not really tight by any means, but I don't think it's going to jump off. Get out of the line of sight. It's alive! I have a sample. Let's see what it does. Alright, set at 0, it should do nothing. And yes, it does nothing. Good. That should be a 16. It touched a few high spots. Touched a few more high spots. Seems to be doing what it does. Alright, it functions. It seems to function, but it doesn't seem to work. Let me explain. Now what it was doing, it was constantly cutting the front and then leaving the back. As mentioned, I've got a little more tune-up to do on this thing, but then I will have a working jointer planer to use in the shop, and that's great. This is supposed to actually be mounted on that cart that I built for the planer, so this is going to be a jointer planer cart. And then whenever I'm milling up lumber for a new project, I can just wheel that outside. This thing made a lot of chips on the floor. This has no kind of dust collection at all, so it's incontinent. It just makes a mess all over the floor. That and the planer as well. So I'll just wheel those outside, do all the messy work out there, wheel them back in, put it in the corner, and then do the rest of my work. So this is great. I've got another machine that I've brought back from nearly dead. Okay, I filmed a lot of stuff on this yesterday, and I gotta go back and figure out what I did wrong with this thing. I've set it up, the tables are even, I'm pretty happy with that. It was still giving me a cut that wasn't quite right. I was getting like a little bow in the middle, and I believe that to be blade height. I think what's happening is the blade is just below the level of the outfeed table, and so the wood comes in when this is set for a 1/16 of an inch cut or something. The wood's coming in, it's getting its cut, and then as soon as it hits the table, it's lifting up onto the table a little bit and kind of negating the rest of the work. That's my theory. You know what they say about theories. So I'm going to adjust the blade based on the outfeed table only. I'm not going to bridge the gap and try to do that. I'm just going to base it on the outfeed table, try to get it up just a little bit so it's dragging on the straight edge, which it wasn't really doing yesterday. And I'm going to see if I can get a better, more reliable cut out of it. And that's what I want to get out of it. Front and back, it grabs and pulls the straight edge just a little ways. It might be a little too far. We'll leave it there. Proof of concept and all that. Good. If you notice by the pile of chips that I have underneath the jointer, I've been working on it. Since I adjusted these blades up just a smidgen, they are just the tiniest bit above the outfeed table, as you saw in the other clip. So I went back to this piece of wood that I was working on yesterday, and I was running it through on the edge, and it just kept taking more off the front and leaving the back alone pretty much. And I got some pretty bad, what they call snipe on the end of it. And the board was relatively flat. I could put it on my table saw. It was pretty flat, but it still had this little rock on the end because it was taking too much off the end of it. So I ran this board back through. It has a bit of a twist to it, so I thought what I would do is flatten this one face so that I can use that as a reference on my fence to make the edge square. What that gave me was a pretty flat face. You can see the face that I did not do. If I put this down the straight edge, it has quite a bit of a warp to it. So by flattening this face with just a couple of passes, I was able to get that very flat. No rock, and more importantly, no rock in the center, no high point in the center like I was getting yesterday. So then I used that against the fence and jointed this edge, and now I have a nice flat edge, no rock to it, there's no snipe on the end, and there's no light underneath it. So I've got a flat, straight, jointed 2x4, for what good that is, with a nice crisp edge, and not exactly sure how to get this to show up. Where am I? Nice tight 90 degrees. So if you like this, I got more of these. I've resurrected a couple other machines, so go dig back into the archives and look at those. I appreciate that. And if you like it, click the little like finger, thumb, and subscribe if you would. That'd be great. I appreciate it. And until next time, I'll find something else to do. See ya.